What if I told you that former Zambian President Edgar Lungu's past isn't finished with him yet? That a hidden legal loophole buried deep in Zambia's justice system could come back to haunt not only him but his entire family. From Lusaka's courtrooms to whispers in Washington and London, the world is asking, is this about justice or politics? Tonight, we uncover the truth behind Lungu's past cases and why this unfinished business still threatens Zambia and Africa today. Don't blink, because the next few minutes could change everything you thought you knew. Former Zambian President Edgar Lungu's past legal battles continue to cast a shadow over Zambia's present and future. But is it really justice or a political game with international players watching closely? In this InspirAfrica official investigation, we break down the hidden legal loophole that could still haunt Edgar Lungu, why Zambia's justice system is under global scrutiny, how the UK, and the US are quietly monitoring Zambia's political direction, the impact of these cases on Zambia's democracy and Africa's stability. Subscribe to InspirAfrica Official for more breaking African political documentaries. The shadow of Edgar Lungu's past. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, Zambia's 6th president 2015 to 2021, passed away on June 5, 2025 in South Africa, leaving behind a legacy as complex and divisive as the nation he once led. His death at 68, following an undisclosed illness, was expected to mark a moment of national mourning and unity. Instead, it has ignited a firestorm of legal battles, political feuds, and cultural controversies that expose Zambia's deep-seated divisions. At the heart of this saga is a bitter rivalry between Lungu and his successor, President Hakainde Hichilema, a feud so intense that it persists even in death. The dispute over Lungu's burial, whether it should be a state funeral in Zambia or a private ceremony in South Africa, has become a microcosm of broader tensions, personal vendettas, political power plays, and questions of national identity. Lungu's presidency was marked by significant achievements, such as infrastructure development, but also by accusations of authoritarianism, economic mismanagement, and suppression of dissent. His administration's detention of Hichilema in 2017 on treason charges, stemming from a motorcade incident, set the stage for a deeply personal and political enmity. This history casts a long shadow over the current dispute, with Lungu's family insisting that his dying wish was for Hichilema to have no role in his funeral. The Zambian government, however, argues that Lungu, as a former head of state, belongs to the nation and must be honored with a state funeral at Embassy Park in Lusaka, where other presidents are buried. This saga is not just a Zambian story. It has drawn international attention, with the UK, US, and global institutions like the IMF watching closely, as Zambia's political stability and economic recovery hang in the balance. The involvement of China, a major investor in Zambia, further complicates the narrative, raising questions about Africa's image on the global stage. This analysis delves into the legal, political, and cultural dimensions of this crisis, exploring whether Zambia can move beyond its divisions and what this means for the nation and the continent. The legal loophole explained. The legal battle over Edgar Lungu's burial hinges on a contentious interplay between Zambian law, South African judicial processes, and cultural norms. The Zambian government, led by Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, argues that former presidents are national property and their burials are governed by state protocol, not personal or family preferences. This position cites a precedent set in 2021 with the burial of Zambia's first president, Kenneth Kaunda. Despite Kaunda's family's wishes to bury him next to his wife, the government insisted on a state funeral at Embassy Park, a decision upheld by Zambia's High Court, which ruled that national interest supersedes individual desires. In Lungu's case, the Zambian government sought to enforce this precedent through South Africa's legal system, as Lungu died in Pretoria on June 25, 2025, just hours before a private burial organized by Lungu's family was set to begin at Johannesburg's Cathedral of Christ the King. The Pretoria High Court issued an order halting the ceremony. The court granted Zambia's request to postpone the burial pending a final decision on repatriation, setting a hearing for August 4, 2025. This ruling was a temporary victory for the government, which argued that Lungu's status as a former president necessitated a state funeral in Zambia. However, the Lungu family, represented by lawyer Makibi Zulu, has fiercely opposed this move, citing Lungu's explicit wish that Hichilema not be involved in his funeral. The family's decision to pursue a private burial in South Africa reflects their distrust of the Zambian government, fueled by years of perceived persecution, including corruption charges against Lungu's widow, Esther, and daughter, Tassila. The family's appeal against the Pretoria High Court's August 8, 2025 ruling, which ordered the repatriation of Lungu's body, has further delayed the process, keeping his remains in a Pretoria morgue under private security due to concerns about unauthorized access. The legal loophole lies in the ambiguity of Zambian law regarding the funerals of former presidents. While the government claims that state funerals are mandatory, Zambian law does not explicitly specify who controls such arrangements, creating a gray area that has allowed the Lungu family to challenge the government's authority. The South African courts, bound by their own legal standards, must balance the Zambian government's claims with the family's rights, particularly under the South African Superior Courts Act, which suspends prior judgments during an appeal. This legal stalemate has prolonged the dispute, with the family vowing to fight as long as it takes to honor Lungu's wishes. The controversy has also raised questions about the Zambian government's government's motives. Political analyst Sishiwa argues that the government's pursuit of control over Lungu's body may be driven by political considerations rather than public interest. He suggests three potential motives: legal coercion to assert state authority, political positioning ahead of the 2026 presidential election, and, most controversially, spiritual concerns. In Zambia, where belief in witchcraft is widespread, some speculate that the government's insistence on accessing Lungu's remains could be linked to occult reasons, a claim that resonates with cultural fears but lacks concrete evidence. This legal battle exposes a broader issue: the politicization of Zambia's judiciary and institutions. Lungu's presidency was criticized for undermining judicial independence, a trend that critics argue continues under Hichilema. The dismissal of 3 constitutional court judges in 2024 who had previously ruled in Lungu's favor fueled accusations of judicial manipulation. The legal loophole, therefore, is not just about funeral protocols but reflects deeper systemic flaws in Zambia's governance, where political rivalries shape legal outcomes. Lungu's family and the ongoing cases. The Lungu family's resistance to the Zambian government's plans is deeply personal, rooted in years of political and legal battles. Esther Lungu, the former First Lady, and her daughter Tassila have faced corruption charges under Hichilema's administration, which they deny. These cases are part of a broader anti-corruption campaign that Lungu supporters, including the Patriotic Front (PF), claim disproportionately targets his allies. The family's distrust of Hichilema is compounded by Lungu's own experiences of alleged harassment, including claims of house arrest and travel restrictions, which the government denied. The emotional toll of the burial dispute was vividly displayed in court on August 8, 2025, when Lungu's elder sister, Bertha Lungu, erupted in anger at Zambia's Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha. Her outburst: "Kabesha, Lungu is not your father's son. He's not Hakane's son. This is really painful. I don't want to go to Zambia," reflected the family's grief and frustration. The family's spokesperson, Makibi Zulu, has accused the government of using public media to smear their name while pushing for control over Lungu's remains. The ongoing legal cases against Esther and Tassila Lungu have intensified the family's resolve to protect Lungu's legacy. They view the government's actions as an extension of the persecution they faced during Lungu's post-presidency years. For instance, Lungu's retirement benefits were stripped after he re-entered politics, a move his supporters decried as vindictive. The family's appeal against the Pretoria High Court's repatriation order, filed hours after the ruling, underscores their determination to maintain control over Lungu's burial, even if it means prolonging the legal battle. The family's stance has garnered support from the PF and the Tons Alliance, led by acting PF President Given Lubinda. Lubinda has framed the appeal as a fight for justice, arguing that the South African court's acceptance of the appeal suspends the repatriation order and protects Lungu's remains from being tampered with. However, critics of the family, including some Zambians on social media, argue that their resistance is politically motivated, accusing the PF of exploiting Lungu's death for political mileage ahead of the 2026 election. The family's legal strategy also raises cultural questions. In Zambia, family involvement in burial arrangements is a deeply rooted tradition, and Sishiwa has criticized the government's actions as culturally insensitive. The family's fear that Hichilema's involvement could lead to spiritual desecration of Lungu's body taps into widespread beliefs in witchcraft, further complicating the dispute. This blend of personal grief, legal battles, and cultural sensitivities has made the Lungu family's position a focal point of Zambia's national drama. Justice or politics? Zambia divided. The dispute over Lungu's burial has polarized Zambia, exposing fault lines between supporters of the ruling United Party for National Development (UPND) and the opposition PF. For UPND supporters, the government's push for a state funeral is a matter of national pride and protocol, ensuring that a former president is honored in accordance with Zambia's traditions. They point to the precedent of Kenneth Kanda's burial and argue that Lungu's status as a former head of state overrides personal wishes. The phrase "it's coming home," popularized by UPND supporters on social media, reflects their view that Lungu's body belongs to Zambia, not just his family. Conversely, PF supporters and the Lungu family see the government's actions as a continuation of Hichilema's alleged vendetta against Lungu. They cite the 2017 treason charges against Hichilema, Lungu's post-presidency harassment, and the ongoing corruption cases against his family as evidence of political persecution. The PF has accused the government of politicizing Lungu's death, with Given Lubinda calling for respect for the family's wishes. The opposition's memorial service in Pretoria, attended by Lungu's widow and daughter, was a deliberate counterpoint to the government's plans, signaling their defiance. This polarization is not just political but also cultural and emotional. Zambians, who value mourning as a sacred process in their Christian-majority nation, are frustrated by the prolonged dispute. Radio stations playing gospel music and memorial services have been overshadowed by legal wrangling, leaving many feeling that Lungu's memory is being dishonored. The government's decision to cut short the national mourning period after the family halted repatriation plans further fueled public discontent. Sishiwa argues that Hichilema's failure to publicly distance himself from the funeral arrangements has exacerbated divisions. Had he announced his non-involvement, Sishiwa contends, the issue might have been resolved earlier. Instead, Instead, the government's insistence on control has fed perceptions of political opportunism, with some accusing Hichilema of using the state funeral to burnish his image ahead of the 2026 election. The division is also evident in public discourse. Social media posts reflect a split between those who view the government's actions as lawful and those who see them as disrespectful. Comments like, "Let PF bury their leader in South Africa. This whole thing has been emotionally draining," contrast with others demanding a state funeral at Embassy Park. This polarization risks deepening Zambia's political fault lines, with implications for national unity as the 2026 election approaches. Why the UK and US are watching closely. The Lungu burial saga has drawn international attention, particularly from the UK and US, due to Zambia's strategic importance and the broader geopolitical context. Zambia is a key player in southern Africa, with significant copper reserves and a growing role in global supply chains. Its political stability is critical for Western interests, especially as China's influence in the region grows. The UK, as Zambia's former colonial power, and the US, a major donor and investor, are closely monitoring the situation for several reasons. First, Zambia's democratic credentials are under scrutiny. Lungu's presidency was criticized for authoritarian tendencies, including the 2017 arrest of Hichilema and allegations of electoral fraud in 2016. Hichilema's 2021 victory was hailed as a democratic renewal, but his administration's actions, such as stripping Lungu's retirement benefits and dismissing judges, have raised concerns about judicial independence and political retribution. The burial dispute, with its legal and political overtones, is seen as a test of Hichilema's commitment to democratic norms. A mishandling of the situation could erode Zambia's reputation as a stable democracy, prompting concern in Washington and London. Second, Zambia's economic recovery is a priority for the West. The country defaulted on its debt in 2020 under Lungu's administration, and Hichilema has since secured an IMF extended credit facility to stabilize the economy. The IMF, backed by the US and UK, has a vested interest in Zambia's reforms, including anti-corruption measures and debt restructuring. However, the ongoing political tensions could undermine these efforts, as public discontent and opposition mobilization risk destabilizing the government's agenda. The US has also issued health warnings in Zambia due to environmental issues, such as a toxic spill in a copper mining area, further highlighting its focus on the country's governance and stability. Third, the UK and US are wary of China's growing influence in Zambia. China is a major investor in Zambia's mining sector and infrastructure, with projects like the Tazara Railway and power plants underscoring its economic footprint. The Lungu administration was seen as pro-China, and Hichilema's government has sought to balance this by strengthening ties with the West. The burial dispute, while seemingly domestic, has geopolitical implications. A prolonged crisis could weaken Hichilema's government, potentially creating an opening for opposition groups aligned with Chinese interests, which the UK and US would view with concern. Finally, the international community is sensitive to human rights and cultural issues. The Lungu family's accusations of government overreach and the cultural insensitivity of disregarding their wishes resonate with global debates about dignity and autonomy. South Africa's involvement, as the site of the legal battle, adds another layer, with its foreign minister, Ronald Lamola, advocating for a resolution that respects both the family and Zambia's national interests. The UK and US are likely to pressure Zambia to resolve the dispute diplomatically to avoid further escalation. Africa's image on the line. The Lungu burial saga has implications for Africa's global image, particularly in the context of governance, stability, and cultural sensitivity. Africa has long faced stereotypes of political instability and mismanagement, and high-profile disputes like this risk reinforcing those narratives. The international media's coverage of the saga, headlines like "Zambia's ex-president and the undignified row over his body," BBC, and "Political rivalry in Zambia extends to funeral," New York Times, highlights the spectacle of a nation unable to mourn its former leader peacefully. This dispute is not unique to Zambia. Similar conflicts have arisen across Africa, such as the burial disputes over Angola's Jonas Savimbi and Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe. These cases underscore a recurring tension between state authority and family wishes, often exacerbated by political rivalries. In Zambia's case, the involvement of South African courts and the prolonged legal battle have drawn scrutiny from regional bodies like the African Union (AU) and the Southern African Development Community (SADC), which Zambia has previously called upon to mediate its disputes. The AU and SADC's silence on the issue, as noted during Lungu's presidency, contrasts with their stated commitment to regional stability, raising questions about their effectiveness. The saga also touches on cultural narratives. The speculation about occult reasons for the government's insistence on controlling Lungu's body reflects deep-seated African beliefs in spirituality and ritual. While such claims may seem sensational to Western audiences, they are significant in Zambia, where Christianity coexists with traditional beliefs. The government's failure to address these concerns sensitively risks portraying Zambia as a nation where cultural values are subordinated to political agendas, potentially damaging Africa's image as a continent striving for modern governance while honoring its heritage. Moreover, the dispute highlights Africa's complex relationship with external powers. China's economic presence, the IMF's financial oversight, and Western diplomatic interest underscore Zambia's position at the intersection of global influences. A stable Zambia is seen as a model for African nations navigating debt crises and geopolitical rivalries. A prolonged crisis could portray Africa as unable to resolve internal conflicts, undermining efforts to project unity and progress on the global stage. Final verdict: will Zambia ever move on? The question of whether Zambia can move on from this crisis is both immediate and existential. In the short term, the legal battle over Lungu's burial must be resolved. The Pretoria High Court's postponed hearing, now scheduled for Monday after August 8, 2025, offers a chance for dialogue between the Lungu family and the Zambian government. A compromise, perhaps a state funeral with limited involvement from Hichilema, could satisfy both sides, but the family's distrust and the government's insistence on protocol make this challenging. Politically, the saga risks entrenching Zambia's divisions as the 2026 election looms. The PF's mobilization around Lungu's death, led by figures like Given Labinda, signals their intent to capitalize on public sympathy. Hichilema's government, meanwhile, must balance its reform agenda with the need to project unity and fairness. The dismissal of judges and ongoing corruption cases against Lungu's family could fuel perceptions of vindictiveness, undermining Hichilema's legitimacy. Economically, Zambia's recovery depends on stability. The IMF's extended credit facility, extended in 2025, requires consistent governance and public support. A protracted dispute could disrupt investor confidence, particularly in the mining sector, where both China and Western companies have significant stakes. The US and UK's interest in Zambia's stability reflects their desire to counterbalance China's influence, but this requires a government that can unify rather than divide. Culturally, Zambia must navigate the tension between state authority and family rights. The government's reliance on legal precedents like Konda's burial overlooks the emotional and spiritual dimensions of mourning in a Christian and traditional society. A resolution that respects Lungu's wishes while honoring his national role could set a precedent for handling such disputes in Africa. Ultimately, Zambia's ability to move on depends on leadership that prioritizes reconciliation over retribution. Hichilema could take a bold step by publicly stepping back from the funeral, as Sishiwa suggests, to de-escalate tensions. The Lungu family, in turn, could agree to a state funeral with guarantees that their concerns are addressed. Without such compromises, Zambia risks remaining trapped in a cycle of grievance and division. Outro and call to action. The saga of Edgar Lungu's burial is more than a dispute over a body. It is a mirror reflecting Zambia's past, present, and future. The shadow of Lungu's presidency, marked by progress and controversy, continues to shape the nation's trajectory. The legal loopholes, family struggles, and political divisions underscore the challenges of building a unified democracy in a polarized society. The international community's attention, from the UK and US to China and the IMF, highlights Zambia's global significance, but also the stakes of its stability. For Zambians, the call to action is clear. Demand leadership that bridges divides, respects cultural values, and prioritizes national interest over personal vendettas. For the government, this means engaging the Lungu family with empathy and transparency. For the PF and opposition, it means honoring Lungu's memory without exploiting it for political gain. For the international community, it means supporting Zambia's democratic and economic reforms while respecting its sovereignty. As the Pretoria Court prepares for its next hearing, the world watches. Will Zambia honor its former president with dignity, or will it remain mired in conflict? The answer lies in the choices made by its leaders, its people, and the global partners who shape its future. Let this moment be a turning point, a chance to move beyond the shadow of the past and toward a united Zambia.